Hey everyone, and welcome back to the new and returning player's guide. Last week we covered realm selection and character creation. This week though, we're jumping in game and the goal is to get you started right so that it's all smooth sailing from here on out. So click your character, hit that enter world button, and after a brief introduction cinematic, you're going to find yourself starting off in your starter zone in front of a quest giver. So there are actually 11 starter zones in the game, and humans start off in Northshire Abbey where they've got to confront a local orc incursion. Dwarves have to deal with a Trog threat in Coldridge Valley, then gnomes have to escape a bit of a disaster in Gnomeregan, night elves have to protect their forest home in Shadowglen, while the Draenei have to rescue survivors of their pretty dangerous crash landing in Ammon Vale. Then the Worgen actually start off as humans in Gilneas City where they've got to confront a curse that is spreading throughout their nation. Then when we move over to the Horde, the new orcs have got to prove themselves in the Valley of Honor, while the trolls have to secure their people's home in the Echo Isles. The Tauren have to protect their plains from a Quillbore invasion. The Undead have a rather unique storyline where they've got to confront their new reality being brought back to life, sometimes even against their will. Then the Blood Elves have got to fight to reclaim their home territories from the leftover undead who still linger from the Third War. Finally, goblins are really finding themselves caught in the thick of the Cataclysm, stuck right out in the middle of the ocean. Now, all of these storylines occur during the Cataclysm expansion timeline, with the exception of the Draenei and the Blood Elves, who happened before that because they were added in the Burning Crusade expansion, but were not revamped when Cataclysm released. So, in the introduction cinematic, you'll hear about how the Cataclysm is tearing up the world, and if you want to learn more about it, just watch the Cataclysm cinematic.
The world heaves with my torment.
You know what? I think it really gets the gist across pretty clearly. Then Pandaren start off in the Wandering Isle where they quest until they hit level 10, at which point they get to select a faction, either Alliance or Horde. Then the game's two hero classes, the Death Knights and the Demon Hunters, have their own starter zones with a pretty tightly directed storyline. They're really cool and I totally recommend giving them a shot for the story once you've unlocked those classes. Anyway, with that covered, let's get back to our characters. So there you are, you're standing in the world. Before I talk about the game content, what I want to do is help you understand the game's controls and its interface. And what we're going to start off with is movement. So the W and S keys on your keyboard will have you running forwards and walking backwards. Then A and D will have you turning left and right, while Q and E will have you strafing left and right. The next piece of the puzzle is the camera. So hold left click and then just move your mouse around. You'll see that your character doesn't move, but you'll be able to pan the camera around your character to get a feel for your surroundings. Next, try that, but instead right click. So you'll see that just like with left click, you move your camera around, but unlike with left click, your character will actually point towards where the camera is looking. Now, while you can move around just fine with WASD, most players in WoW use the right mouse button as the main way of aiming their character. So what I'd like you to get used to doing is running around by holding W and then steering using your mouse with the right click. Most people find this to be the most comfortable way to control their character once they're used to it. And controlling the game like this lets you develop vital muscle memory that'll be really useful later on, so it's worth starting off on the right foot. Okay, so that's how we move and that's how we control the camera. And note also that the scroll wheel can be used to zoom in and out. So with movement nailed, let's talk about the interface. Now on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a bunch of empty buttons. This is called your action bar, and it's where you'll be putting all of your abilities once you've earned them. So if you put an ability in slot 2 of the action bar, and then you hit the 2 key on your keyboard, well, you'll use that ability. Now you can rearrange abilities by shift clicking on them and dragging them about the place. Many players do click on these abilities, that's fine in the early game, but I really think you should get used to using your keybinds, using your keyboard for them. That's a skill that'll really benefit you once you get into the higher end content of the game. So that's the action bar covered. If you look to the left of the action bar, you'll see the chat window. This is where you'll be able to see people, what characters near your character say, as well as what people say in your party across the whole of Azeroth if you've joined a party, as well as messages from your Battle.net friends and people talking in zone-wide chat channels. So above the chat box, you'll see the player portrait, and at the very top of that, there's a green bar that represents your health. Below that, you'll see something different depending on your class. Magic users have a mana bar, while other classes maybe have energy or focus. You may even have another thing below that that displays combo points if you're a rogue or a feral druid, chi if you're a monk, or runes if you're a death knight. That'll all make sense depending on what class you picked though, so there's really nothing to worry about with that. You can right click on your character portrait and you'll get a bunch of options frames, including the ability to unlock that frame, and that's going to allow you to move it elsewhere, and the same can be done for the target frame, which we'll see shortly. Then on the top right, you'll see the minimap, and below that you'll see the objective frame, which will allow you to keep tabs on all of your current quests. Below that, we see our bag bar, that's where your character's inventory is, and below that, we see the micro menu. So this contains a bunch of different panels for the various different game features. Now, you can find the spell book here. This is where you'll see all of the spells that are available to your character, and you can drag unlocked spells from your spell book down onto your action bar. Then you'll also see that the talent menu is here, and this unlocks at level 10, which is also when you unlock class specializations. So talents offer gameplay customization, and you unlock all talent rows by the time you hit level 100. There are also war mode talents, which become active if you turn on war mode. That's a little bit advanced for now, but don't worry, we will cover war mode later. Then the social window contains guilds and communities, which are basically just types of player organizations that you can join. We'll cover them later. Then we've got the collections panel, which contains all of the pets, mounts, toys, and gear appearances that you've unlocked. And then you can click on the map button to explore the map, and when you're on that, if you right click, you'll zoom out a level, and if you left click, you'll zoom in a level. The world map is then also integrated into your quest log, which you can see on the right of that panel. So, now that you understand that, it's time to pick up that quest from the NPC who's standing in front of your character. It will be pretty simple, just defeating some basic enemies. So, right click on the quest giver, that will open up the dialogue menu, and then accept the quest. So now you're pretty much good to go. If you look in your minimap, then you'll see that the quest area is highlighted. If you hit M to open up the world map, you'll see it in a little bit more detail. So head over there, that's where our enemies are. And that means it's time to learn about the basics of targeting enemies. So you can left click on an enemy to select it, and you'll notice that the enemy portrait appears along with their health bar. Right clicking an enemy does the same, but it will also initiate your auto attack if you're playing a class that has auto attacks, such as a melee class or a hunter. Another way to target enemies is with the tab key. This will cycle between enemies who are in front of you, so what you probably want to do here is right click on the enemy. If you're a ranged spec, maybe start hitting the keybind for your basic damaging spell. Then if you're melee, run up to them and start to use your offensive abilities. Once the enemy is dead, look at their corpse. You'll be able to right click on it to get some loot. If you hit B, you'll open your bag and you'll see that that's where your loot has went. Great, so defeat enough enemies to complete the quest, go back to the quest giver, and once you hand it in, they will give you some gear. That gear will be put into your bag, so open up your bag, and you can right click on that gear to put it on, or if you want to see your character in the character window, then you can either click that on the micro menu or just press the C key by default. So that's pretty much enough to get you on your feet. Keep on doing quests in the starter zone, you'll get used to it, and eventually you'll be sent out into the world. You'll be headed to an inn in the first major town of your main zone. Now, the quests in your first zone will get you up to level 10. So that's really the core of leveling in World of Warcraft, but I do want to explain how some of the broader world works. So if you hit the M key, that'll open up your world map. You can then right-click on it to zoom out, and if you go and mouse over the various zones, you can see they've got these level brackets. It's either like 1 to 20 or something between 20 to 40 and 60. These are the level brackets for the zones, and they're quite large because of a new system that Blizzard implemented where enemies in most zones will scale in power and keep pace with your character. This means that you can really go through the world in a more free-form fashion, allowing you to explore more of it, and also avoiding the old problem of out-leveling a zone, a situation where you'd be halfway through a zone's story, but you'd massively out-level the content, which meant that the rewards wouldn't really be relevant to you, and that thankfully is an issue that has been solved. So this ties into the new quest board system as well, and you can find these quest boards in capital cities or local taverns. You'll actually see one in, say, Elwyn Forest, or like the first inn that you find, and if you click on that, it will suggest some zones for you to head to, and it will give you a quest that will take you into that zone and get you used to its story. And really what I've covered here will get you comfortably set off on your adventure through the world. I would recommend checking out a few of the basic starter zones first, and then perhaps hopping onto a Worgen or a Goblin later on. They're a little bit more complex, but they're actually quite fun starter zones. They've got a really tight storyline running through them. So that's pretty much what I recommend you do. Next, let's just talk about options. So if you hit the escape key and click system settings, you'll get graphics and sound tweaks. Here you can just change your visuals to match the performance of your computer. I typically find that the largest performance hits are from having the view distance above 7 and having shadows set to one of the higher settings. So if the game's chugging a bit, then maybe they're like some of the first settings that you should lower in order to increase your performance. Then sound settings, really, they're just to your preference. personally I like to bump up the ambient sounds a bit because I like, well, how they sound. Then you'll also find various interface options in the interface section. There's really nothing that'll be essential to playing the game at this early stage, so I would mainly just recommend getting used to the controls and getting into the flow of questing. You'll probably though start watching other people playing World of Warcraft, maybe on Twitch or perhaps guides on YouTube, and you might notice that their games look very different to how yours looks. That's because World of Warcraft lets people install custom UIs, basically their own custom versions of the WoW interface. Now, you don't have to worry about this, but it's just worth you keeping that in mind so that you understand why people's games might look completely different to yours. And that's pretty much it for this video. The main focus is just chilling out and getting used to the content. I've woven a few of my own best practice tips throughout this video, so I think that this will have you getting started on a path that will comfortably lead to you being pretty good at the game in the later levels. Next week, though, I'm going to be covering the leveling process in a lot more depth, focusing on really level 20 and above. So for now, I think just give a few characters a go, explore their starter zones, take a broad sampling of the game's content, and enjoy yourself. So, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next week.